This story ends with a daughter's act of justice so powerful, it will make every mother and grandmother proud. Don't miss the last 5 seconds. And hey, before we dive in, if you've ever wanted to sneak into life's kitchen, grab a cookie, and lock the jar so no one else gets one. That's exactly what hitting the like button feels like. Go ahead, lock it in. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story that could change the way you see family forever. This is the story of how one daughter turned betrayal and heartbreak into the sweetest justice her family had ever seen. Before the heartbreak, before the betrayal, there was a dream. And for Emily, that dream wore a dazzling smile and carried the name Ryan. Emily had always been the steady one. The daughter who never rebelled too hard. The young woman who chased security over chaos. Her friends teased her for being old-fashioned when she turned down wild nights out in favor of cozy dinners with her parents, but deep down, Emily knew what she wanted. She didn't crave adventure, she craved a family. A home filled with laughter, Sunday dinners, and someone who would hold her hand even in old age. When Ryan entered her world, it felt like God himself had checked off every box on her secret list. He was tall but not intimidating, confident without being overbearing, and funny in a way that made strangers lean closer just to hear the punchline. He had that boyish grin that charmed waitresses, that sparkle in his eye that made people forgive him before he even finished apologizing for being late. They met at a friend's barbecue on a summer afternoon. Emily remembered the smell of grilled corn in the air, the sticky sweetness of lemonade on her lips, and Ryan, standing by the fire pit, sleeves rolled, laughing like the world belonged to him. When their eyes met, he crossed the yard with a swagger that made Emily's heart stutter. "You look like someone who knows how to make a perfect s'more," he said, and just like that, she was lost. The courtship was a whirlwind. Dinners that stretched until dawn, long drives with the windows down, promises whispered under starlight. Emily's parents adored him. Her father clapped him on the back after just 2 meetings. Her mother, Susan, told her quietly one evening, "Sweetheart, he reminds me of your grandfather, steady, strong, the kind of man who'll take care of you." So when Ryan knelt down in front of a string of fairy lights at their favorite diner and asked her to marry him, Emily said yes through tears. The room erupted in applause. For Emily, it felt like the start of a forever she had always dreamed about. Their early days were bliss. The honeymoon was spent in Hawaii, where they walked barefoot on the beach, carving their initials into wet sand like children. Back home, they bought a modest house with a white fence and a little garden Emily filled with roses. They painted their daughter's nursery together, Ryan joking about his clumsy brushstrokes, Emily humming lullabies as she rolled paint onto the walls. To the outside world they were perfect. Neighbors waved when they passed by. Friends envied Emily's storybook marriage. Even Susan would call and say, "Every time I see you two, I thank God my daughter found such a good man." But perfection, as it often does, was a mask. Behind Ryan's easy laugh and warm hugs, shadows stirred. Little things Emily brushed aside at first. An odd look in his eyes when she asked about work, the way his phone was always turned face down on the table, the times he came home smelling faintly of whiskey though he swore he was just with the guys. Emily told herself not to worry. After all, love was about trust. And hadn't Ryan given her every reason to believe? She was building a life with him, a family. Doubt didn't belong in the picture. So she ignored the whispers of her intuition. She clung tighter to the dream. Because for Emily, love wasn't just about romance. It was about the promise she had made, the forever she had signed her name to. She didn't know it yet, but the cracks were already forming in the glass of her perfect life. And when they finally shattered, the sound would echo through every corner of her heart. The dream life didn't collapse all at once. It cracked like glass under pressure, tiny fractures spreading silently until they could no longer be ignored. First, Emily explained everything away. Ryan's late nights. Work was stressful. The missed dinner. An emergency project. The phone turned face down on the counter. He was just being polite, so calls wouldn't interrupt family time. These were little things after all. Didn't every marriage have them? But little things have a way of becoming big things when they pile up. Began with the bills. Emily had always handled the family budget. She liked knowing where money went, liked balancing the checkbook the way her father had taught her. But one evening when she logged into their joint account, she froze. Charges from bars she'd never heard of. Restaurants miles away from his office. Withdrawals at odd hours, sometimes past midnight. When she asked Ryan, he waved it off. Networking dinners, he said with a laugh. Business expenses, you know how it is. Emily wanted to believe him. She chose to believe him. Because the alternative, the thought that her husband might be lying, was too painful to entertain. But the cracks deepened. Ryan stopped joining her and their daughter for family breakfasts. He claimed early meetings, yet sometimes came home the next morning with wrinkled clothes and bloodshot eyes. He began avoiding her gaze, brushing off questions with a quick kiss and a joke. And then came the nights. Emily would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening for the sound of his key in the lock. Sometimes he stumbled in, the smell of whiskey trailing him like a shadow. Other times he didn't come home at all. When she confronted him, his answers shifted. First work, then friends, then simply, "Why are you always on my back?" Her mother, Susan, noticed the change. Over coffee one afternoon she asked gently, "Sweetheart, are you and Ryan all right? You seem tired." Emily forced a smile. "Just busy, Mom. You know how life gets." But her eyes betrayed her. They told the truth her lips refused to form. The distance wasn't just financial or physical, it was emotional. Ryan stopped listening. When Emily shared stories about their daughter's first school recital, he nodded absently, scrolling on his phone. When she reached for his hand in church, he shifted away, as if her touch burned. Still, Emily clung to the dream. She remembered the man who had charmed her family, the man who carved their initials into Hawaiian sand, the man who had painted their daughter's nursery with clumsy brushstrokes. She told herself he was still in there, buried under stress, under exhaustion, under life's heavy demands. But deep inside, her heart knew. One night, while folding laundry, she found a receipt stuffed in Ryan's jeans pocket. High-end restaurant. 2 meals, expensive wine. The date and time matched an evening he had sworn he was working late. Her chest tightened as she stared at the slip of paper. It wasn't proof, not yet, but it was something. A whisper of betrayal carried on the thin white page. She slipped the receipt into her pocket, too afraid to confront him, too desperate to hold on to what little illusion remained. That evening, after Ryan kissed their daughter goodnight and left for another meeting, Emily sat at the kitchen table in silence. The hum of the refrigerator filled the room, steady and low, as she stared at the shadows on the wall. For the first time, she whispered aloud the fear she had buried for months. What if he doesn't love us anymore? The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and suffocating. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, words from years earlier. "Sweetheart, love is about presence. Anyone can say the words, but the one who shows up, that's the one who truly loves you." And Ryan wasn't showing up anymore. The cracks were spreading fast now. Emily could feel it in the way he avoided her, in the way the house felt colder even when the heat was on, in the way her daughter asked, "Why doesn't Daddy eat with us anymore?" Emily smiled and told her child that Daddy was busy. But in her heart she knew the truth. The glass was breaking. And soon it would shatter completely. Some truths don't arrive quietly. They crash into your life like a thunderstorm, leaving no room for denial. For Emily, the storm came on an ordinary Tuesday. Ryan had left for another late meeting. Their daughter was asleep upstairs, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. The house was silent except for the steady tick of the wall clock. Emily sat alone at the dining table, her phone in hand, scrolling through unanswered messages she had sent him. "Where are you? Dinner's cold. Are you coming home?" No reply. Her stomach twisted with unease. She had lived in this fog for months, brushing aside her instincts, silencing her mother's gentle warnings, excusing the excuses. But tonight something shifted. She opened her laptop, pulled up their shared phone bill and scrolled. There it was. Dozens of late-night calls to the same unknown number. Hours of conversation, long after she had gone to bed. Her hands trembled as she copied the number into a search bar. Within seconds, the name appeared. Woman. A woman who worked in Ryan's office. Emily's breath caught in her throat. The world blurred. It wasn't a stranger in some distant bar. It wasn't harmless business dinners. It was someone he saw every day. Someone close. He felt sick. The next morning she decided to test him. Over breakfast she asked casually, "So, how's your team at work?" Anyone knew. Ryan didn't look up from his phone. Same old. Nothing worth talking about. Light. Smooth, practiced, effortless. And that was when something inside her broke. That evening Emily followed him. She hated herself for it. Hated the secrecy, the creeping in shadows. But she had to know. She had to end the torture of not knowing. She drove a few blocks behind him, her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Ryan's car pulled up outside a sleek downtown restaurant. Emily parked across the street, her pulse hammering in her ears. She watched as Ryan stepped out, straightened his shirt, and walked inside. A few minutes later she saw her. The woman from the phone records. Young, polished, laughing as she leaned into Ryan's touch. And then, like a knife, Emily saw it. Ryan placed his hand gently on the woman's back, guiding her inside. Not businesslike, not casual, intimate, familiar. Her vision blurred with tears. Emily could have stormed in. Could have screamed, shattered glasses, torn the illusion apart right there. But instead, she sat frozen in her car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her hands ached. The betrayal was no longer whispers of receipts or unanswered calls. It was here, alive in front of her eyes. She drove home in silence, the weight of the truth pressing her chest into stone. Every memory replayed itself in her mind. The wedding vows, the honeymoon promises, the nursery painting. All of it mocked her now. How easily he had lied. How quickly he had erased the life they had built. When Ryan returned that night, smelling faintly of expensive wine, Emily pretended to be asleep. She couldn't bear to hear his voice, to feel his presence beside her. Tears soaked her pillow as she realized. The man she had loved no longer existed. The next morning, Susan stopped by unannounced. One look at her daughter's swollen eyes, and she knew. "Emily," she whispered, kneeling beside her on the couch. "You don't have to tell me. I can see it." And for the first time, Emily didn't argue. She collapsed into her mother's arms, sobbing, shaking, whispering over and over. "He's with someone else. He doesn't love me anymore." Susan held her, stroking her hair. "Sweetheart, listen to me. This isn't your fault. You gave your heart, your trust, your everything. If he broke it, that's on him, not you." Emily wanted to believe her. But betrayal has a way of infecting the soul, convincing you that maybe you weren't enough. Maybe you were the reason. Maybe if you had loved harder, been prettier, cooked better meals, kept the spark alive, maybe then he wouldn't have strayed. But deep inside she knew. Ryan's choices were his own. And tonight Emily made her own choice too. She would stop lying to herself. She would face the truth. And one day soon she would confront him. The storm had arrived. And Emily was standing in the middle of it. The silence between them had grown into a third presence in the house. It lingered in every hallway, pressed against the walls at night, and sat heavily at the dinner table. Emily couldn't stand it anymore. Pretending to be blind was crushing her soul. For days she had rehearsed what she would say. In the shower, driving her daughter to school, whispering into her pillow at night when Ryan's steady breathing filled the dark. But when the moment finally came, nothing sounded right. It was Friday evening. Their daughter was at a sleepover with a friend. For once, the house belonged only to them. Emily stood in the kitchen, her heart pounding so violently she thought it might burst. She had set the stage without even realizing it. The dishes cleared, the lights dimmed, the clock ticking like a metronome for the performance about to unfold. Ryan walked in, loosened his tie, and dropped his keys on the counter. "Smells good," he said casually, pointing to the dinner she hadn't touched. Emily's throat tightened. "Sit down, Ryan," she said softly. Something in her tone made him glance up. His smile faltered. "What's going on?" Emily sat across from him, folding her trembling hands in her lap. "I know." He blinked. "Know what?" Her eyes burned as she locked onto his. About her. The late-night calls. The dinners. The lies. For a moment Ryan froze like a man caught under a spotlight. His jaw tightened. "Emily, it's not what you think." "Don't," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please don't insult me with more lies." "Followed you, Ryan. I saw you with her." The words hung between them, sharp as broken glass. Ryan's face shifted. First shock, then anger, then a smooth, practiced calm. "You followed me. You spied on me." Emily laughed bitterly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Don't you dare turn this on me. You've been sneaking around for months and I've been sitting here, waiting, doubting myself, thinking I was crazy. But I'm not crazy. You're cheating on me, Ryan. Just say it." He slammed his hand on the table, making the plates rattle. "Fine," he snapped. "Yes, I've been seeing her. And you know what? With her I feel alive. She listens. She doesn't nag. She doesn't make me feel like a failure every time I walk through that door." The words cut like knives. Emily staggered back in her chair as if he had struck her. "A failure," she whispered. "I've stood by you through everything. I've sacrificed my dreams for this family. I've raised our daughter, kept this home, loved you when you didn't even love yourself. And you call me the problem?" Ryan's shoulders heaved. For a moment, he seemed to realize the cruelty of what he had just said. His voice softened. "Emily, I didn't mean it like that. Things got complicated. I didn't plan for this to happen." She wiped her tears, straightened her back, and found a strength she didn't know she had. "No, Ryan. Affairs don't just happen. You chose this. Every call. Every lie. Every touch of her hand, that was your choice. And now I have to make mine." He looked at her, confusion flickering in his eyes. "What do you mean?" Emily stood, her voice steadier than it had been in months. "I mean I will not let you break me. I will not let our daughter grow up thinking this is love. If you want her, then go. But don't expect me to stay here, pretending we're still a family." Ryan stared at her, speechless. For the first time she saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of losing control, but fear of losing her. The kitchen felt like a battlefield, silence ringing louder than shouting. Emily's chest rose and fell as if she had run a marathon. Her whole body trembled, but inside something fierce had awakened. She had faced the monster. She had looked betrayal in the eye. And though the wound still bled, she was no longer hiding in the dark. That night, she slept alone in the guest room. Her daughter's rabbit clutched against her chest like a shield. Ryan lay on the other side of the house, staring at the ceiling, drowning in the silence he had created. Emily's world was shattered. But from the pieces she felt the first sparks of something new. Resolve. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of her fight for justice, dignity, and the future her daughter deserved. The house no longer felt like home. It felt like a hollow shell, echoing with the ghosts of broken promises. After the confrontation, Ryan moved through the rooms like a stranger, cold, distant, almost resentful. He avoided Emily's eyes, spoke only when necessary, and spent more nights away than at home. Emily didn't ask where he went. She already knew. But the silence after his absence was worse than his presence. Emily sat at the kitchen table most nights, staring at the empty chair across from her. The chair where he used to sit, laughing with their daughter, telling stories about work. Now it was just wood and emptiness. Her mother, Susan, visited often, bringing home-cooked meals and gentle comfort. But no amount of food or warmth could fill the gaping wound inside Emily's chest. She moved through her days on autopilot, packing lunches, folding laundry, tucking her daughter into bed with fake smiles that fooled no one. One night, as she leaned down to kiss her daughter goodnight, the little girl whispered, "Mommy, why are you sad all the time?" The words pierced deeper than Ryan's confession ever had. Emily's throat closed up, and she forced a smile. "I'm just tired, sweetheart. But I promise, everything will be okay." When she left the room, she collapsed against the wall, sobbing silently into her hands. She wasn't crying for herself anymore. She was crying for her daughter. For the innocence lost, for the family slipping away, for the future now clouded with uncertainty. And then, in the middle of that storm of grief, something shifted. Emily realized she couldn't stay broken forever. Her daughter was watching her, learning from her. If Emily crumbled, if she let betrayal define her, what lesson would that teach? That love was weakness. That women should accept whatever pain was given to them. Well, Emily refused to let that be her daughter's inheritance. The next morning, she woke with red eyes but a clearer mind. She pulled out a notebook and began writing. Not about her pain, but about her future. Goals, plans, boundaries. She listed lawyers to call, job applications to submit, friends she had lost touch with and wanted to reach out to. Each line she wrote felt like a small brick in the foundation of a new life. When Susan saw her daughter scribbling at the kitchen table, she smiled softly. "That's the spirit, Emily. You're stronger than you think." Emily nodded, though her hand trembled as she wrote. Strength didn't feel natural yet. It felt borrowed, like she was wearing armor that didn't quite fit. But every day she put it on, it grew more comfortable. Ryan, sensing the shift, grew restless. He tried to undermine her resolve with small jabs. "You won't survive without me. Who's going to pay the bills? Who's going to give you the life you're used to?" Emily looked him in the eye and, for the first time, didn't flinch. "I'll give myself that life. And I'll give our daughter something you can't, peace." That shut him up. The tension between them grew unbearable. Arguments flared over small things. Groceries, schedules, even the thermostat. But underneath it all was the unspoken truth. Their marriage was over. Yet, Emily refused to let bitterness consume her. She began journaling daily, channeling her rage into ink, transforming her despair into words that gave her power. She joined a support group for women facing betrayal, and there she found stories that mirrored her own. Stories of survival. Stories of rebuilding. Stories that reminded her she was not alone. And slowly, a vision began to form in her mind. Not just of surviving Ryan's betrayal, but of reclaiming her life, her dignity, her justice. One evening, she stood in front of the mirror, staring at the woman reflected back at her. She didn't see the broken wife anymore. She saw a mother, a fighter, a woman ready to rise. Emily whispered to her reflection, "This is not the end of me. This is the beginning." Her hands still shook. Her heart still ached. But the flame inside her, once dim and flickering, now burned steadily. The aftermath of betrayal had nearly destroyed her. But in its ruins, Emily had found something unexpected. A turning point. A chance to rewrite her story. Courage is not built in a single night. It is forged day by day in the furnace of choice. By the time autumn leaves began to scatter across the sidewalks, Emily had made her choice. She would no longer live as a victim of Ryan's betrayal. She would fight for her dignity, her daughter's future, and her own freedom. The first step was the hardest, walking into a lawyer's office. The waiting room smelled of old coffee and fresh paper, and Emily's hands shook as she filled out the intake form. Divorce, custody, financial settlement. Each word stabbed like a dagger, but she forced herself to write. Her lawyer, a calm woman named Denise, listened patiently as Emily recounted everything. Ryan's absences, the phone records, the confrontation. When Emily's voice cracked, Denise leaned forward, her tone firm but kind. "Emily, you have more power than you realize. The law protects you. And with evidence of his affair, you're in a strong position. He may try to intimidate you, but remember, men like Ryan feed on fear. The moment you stop being afraid, you win." Those words lit a spark inside her. But the fight wasn't only legal. It was emotional. Ryan reacted to the divorce papers like a cornered animal. He raged, accused her of turning their daughter against him, even threatened to drag the process out to make her pay. Emily didn't rise to his bait. She recorded his outbursts, forwarded threatening texts to her lawyer, and reminded herself of Susan's steady voice. "Stand tall, sweetheart. Don't let him break your spirit." The financial strain hit quickly. Ryan cut off her access to their joint credit cards. Bills piled up like bricks on her chest. For a few terrifying weeks, Emily wondered how she would make rent, buy groceries, keep her daughter in her school. But instead of collapsing, she hustled. She polished her resume, applied for jobs, and within weeks landed a position at a local nonprofit. A modest salary, but enough to start standing on her own. On her first payday, she treated her daughter to ice cream and whispered, "See? Mommy can do this. We're going to be okay." Still, the emotional battle raged inside her. Nights were the hardest. The loneliness pressed in, heavy and suffocating. Memories of Ryan's laughter, his touch, their family dinners. These haunted her like ghosts she couldn't evict. But every time despair threatened to swallow her, Emily returned to her journal. She poured her pain onto paper, and slowly, the ink transformed into strength. Her words became a manifesto of survival, a declaration that she was more than what Ryan had done to her. Her support group became her second family. Women who had walked through fire and emerged stronger held her hand, wiped her tears, and reminded her she was not fighting alone. One evening, after Emily shared her progress, a woman named Carla squeezed her hand and said, "You think this broke you, but it's actually building you. Wait until you see who you are on the other side." And Emily believed her. The custody battle loomed like a storm cloud. Ryan tried to paint himself as the perfect father, despite his absences and reckless choices. In court, Emily's hands trembled as she took the stand. She spoke clearly, truthfully, about the nights Ryan never came home, the lies, the pain, the way their daughter had begun asking questions no child should have to ask. When she finished, the judge studied her with quiet respect. In that moment, Emily realized something powerful. She wasn't just defending herself. She was standing up for every woman who had ever been silenced, gaslit, or betrayed. And then came the turning tide. Ryan's own arrogance betrayed him. Evidence of his affair surfaced in court. Photos, messages, receipts he thought he'd hidden. His calm mask cracked, revealing anger, selfishness, and entitlement. The judge's ruling was clear: primary custody to Emily, fair financial support, and visitation structured around the child's stability. Emily walked out of the courthouse that day with tears streaming down her face, not of grief but of triumph. She had stood in the fire and survived. That evening, she and her daughter sat on the couch, eating popcorn and watching cartoons. At one point, the little girl leaned her head on Emily's shoulder and whispered, "I love you, Mommy. You're the strongest person I know." Emily's chest tightened with emotion. For months, she had doubted her worth, her strength, her future. But hearing those words from her daughter, she knew the fight had been worth it. Justice wasn't just about court papers or financial settlements. Justice was reclaiming her power. Justice was giving her daughter a safe, loving home. Justice was proving, to Ryan, to the world, and to herself, that betrayal could break her heart, but it would never break her spirit. And as Emily tucked her daughter into bed that night, she whispered to herself, "This is not just survival. This is victory." Karma doesn't always strike fast. Sometimes it waits, biding its time, letting a man believe he's untouchable, until the fall comes, swift and merciless. For Ryan, the fall began quietly. After the court ruling, his visits with their daughter became irregular. At first, he tried to play the doting father, showing up with flashy gifts and exaggerated smiles. But children have a way of seeing through facades. Their daughter soon began to notice the missed weekends, the unanswered calls, the way Ryan's attention drifted toward his phone instead of her drawings. "Mommy," she asked one night, curling up beside Emily, "why doesn't Daddy stay long anymore?" Emily swallowed hard, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "Sweetheart, sometimes people make choices that keep them from being who we need them to be. But remember this: you are loved always." Meanwhile, Ryan's shiny affair began to dull. The woman who once laughed at his jokes and admired his ambition began to see the cracks. He was moody, distracted, and burdened by the financial strain of alimony and child support. The dinners became arguments. The whispered promises turned into resentful sighs. One evening, Emily received an email from her lawyer. Ryan had fallen behind on payments. He claimed his company was struggling, his bonuses slashed, his future uncertain. Emily almost laughed at the irony. The man who once flaunted his success was now drowning in bills he had created himself. Word spread through the community too. Colleagues whispered about his affair, clients distanced themselves, and slowly his professional reputation began to crumble. The same charm he used to climb ladders now rang hollow, exposed by his own recklessness. Then came the call. It was late on a rainy Thursday when Susan answered the phone. Ryan had been caught, embezzling funds from a side project, trying to cover debts. It wasn't prison-worthy, but it cost him his job, his credibility, and his standing in the industry. Emily listened as Susan relayed the news, a mix of shock and quiet vindication washing over her. She hadn't wished him ruin, but she couldn't deny the truth. Ryan had built his own downfall, brick by brick. The final blow came months later. The woman he had risked everything for, the one he betrayed his family to chase, left him, packed her bags, cut ties, and walked away without a backward glance. Ryan was left alone in a small apartment, staring at the pieces of a life he had shattered with his own hands. And Emily, she didn't gloat. She didn't send angry texts or smug messages. She simply moved on. When Ryan tried to rekindle conversation, "Maybe we could try again for our daughter's sake," Emily met his eyes with calm resolve. "No, Ryan. Our daughter needs stability, not confusion. And I need peace. You made your choices. I'm making mine." He looked at her then, truly looked, and for the first time she saw regret flicker in his eyes. But it was too late. Their daughter, once wide-eyed with love for her father, now grew cautious. She still cared for him. Blood runs deep, but the pedestal had vanished. She saw his flaws, his failures, his humanity. And though Emily never poisoned her against him, the truth of his actions had already spoken louder than words. That was the karmic twist. Ryan lost not just a wife, but the respect of the very people he once took for granted. His empire of lies crumbled, and he stood among the ruins, finally facing the cost of betrayal. Emily, on the other hand, had risen. She had a steady job, a growing sense of self, and a home filled with laughter again. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it no longer defined her. Her scars had become armor. Her tears had watered resilience. One night, as she watched her daughter asleep, Emily whispered a prayer, not for revenge but for closure. Let him learn. Let him change. Let him find his own peace. But keep us safe, strong, and free. And in that moment, she realized something profound. True justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's simply about watching karma do its work while you walk away, whole and unbroken. Ryan had lost nearly everything. Emily had gained herself. The end of one story is often the beginning of another. For Emily, the scars of betrayal had once felt permanent, carved into her very soul. But as the seasons shifted, she discovered that scars were not chains. They were proof of survival. Life after Ryan was not instantly easy. There were lonely nights, bills that weighed heavy, and moments when doubt whispered, "What if I can't do this alone?" But each challenge became an opportunity for growth. With every step forward, Emily proved to herself that she was not just surviving, she was rebuilding. She poured herself into her career, not for prestige or competition, but for purpose. The job that had once been a distraction from pain became a canvas for her talent and determination. Slowly, colleagues began to admire not just her work ethic, but her quiet strength. She was invited to lead projects, mentor newcomers, and in time, her voice carried weight in rooms where she had once been overlooked. More importantly, Emily found balance. Weekends were no longer battles of tears and arguments but moments of peace with her daughter. They painted together, baked messy cakes, laughed at silly movies, and sometimes just sat quietly, holding hands, two souls bound by resilience. Her daughter no longer asked why Daddy didn't stay. Instead, she proudly told her teachers, "My mommy is the strongest person I know." But Emily's renewal wasn't just professional or parental. It was deeply personal. For the first time in years, she started to dream again. She joined a local book club, something she had always wanted but never had time for during the chaos of her marriage. She reconnected with Susan and other friends, laughing over dinners, rediscovering joy and connection. Healing also meant learning to trust herself again. One autumn evening, standing by the window as golden leaves danced outside, Emily realized she no longer defined herself by what Ryan had done. She was not the betrayed wife. She was Emily, A woman who had faced devastation and chosen to rise, not remain broken. And then, quietly, life brought her something unexpected. Not a grand romance or a sweeping fairy tale, but a gentle companionship. A man from her circle of friends, kind, patient, someone who never pushed but always respected, began spending more time with her. Their bond grew naturally, built not on drama or desire to fill a void, but on mutual respect and warmth. Emily hesitated at first, wary of repeating old mistakes. But with time, she learned that love after betrayal doesn't mean forgetting the past. It means recognizing that not everyone will treat you the way you were once treated. She didn't rush, she didn't surrender herself blindly. She allowed this new chapter to unfold at her pace, with boundaries and wisdom earned through pain. Years later, Emily stood in her garden watching her daughter, now a confident teenager, help plant flowers. The once fragile child had grown into a young woman with resilience in her eyes and kindness in her heart. She had inherited not the bitterness of her father's mistakes, but the strength of her mother's courage. "Mom," her daughter said, wiping soil from her hands, "when I grow up I want to be like you. Strong, brave, and happy." Emily smiled, tears glistening. "You already are." That was Emily's legacy. Not revenge, not wealth, not the story of a broken marriage, but the example of transformation. She had shown her daughter that life's darkest moments don't define you unless you let them. That betrayal can be the soil where resilience blooms. That love of self is the foundation upon which all other loves should stand. As for Ryan, he remained on the outskirts of their lives. Present at times, absent at others, a figure marked by regret and wasted chances. Emily no longer held anger for him. It had burned out long ago. Instead, she held a quiet compassion, the kind reserved for someone who had lost their way. But compassion didn't mean reconciliation. She had closed that chapter permanently. The final act of Emily's journey was not about Ryan at all. It was about her. About a woman who walked through fire and came out not consumed, but refined. About a mother who turned pain into lessons for her child. About a soul who discovered that healing is not a destination, but a continuous choice made every single day. Emily's renewal was not loud, not dramatic. It was steady, graceful, unshakable. And as she looked toward the horizon of her life, she no longer saw endings, only beginnings. Because Emily had not just survived betrayal. She had transcended it. She had become, in every sense of the word, free. And that was Emily's journey, from heartbreak to justice, and finally to renewal. If her story moved you, remember this. Revenge may begin the journey, but strength and wisdom write the ending. At Revenge Hub, every tale leaves you with more than shock. It leaves you with hope, lessons, and power. So don't just watch. Join our family. Hit subscribe, ring the bell, and share this story with someone who needs a reminder that no betrayal can break a truly strong heart. Until next time, stay strong, stay wise, and remember, karma always finds its way.